All right, so let us begin with this webinar about classic versus agile project management. And today we will be talking about where to apply this, where maybe classic methods are more applicable and where maybe agile methods are a bit more applicable to different structural approaches. So whether you're doing a project or whether you're doing a product development of some sort, let's talk about classic versus agile. My name is Ruth and I am a senior consultant at SERVIEW. I have been doing project management for roughly about 9 years now and have a lot of experience in agile projects and transformations as an agile coach. So who better to talk about this topic, right? And it's not an easy topic, to be honest. So let us just jump right in. We are going to talk about the following topics. So classic versus agile, what even is that? What is classic? What is an agile approach? Where is the difference? Where are the application areas? So when do I rather use classic or when do I rather use an agile method? And you will see that the word classic right here is put into marks. So when we're talking about classic, of course, we mean something that on the spectrum from very strict approaches to very agile approaches, we will be more on the stricter side. So that is what we mean by classic. Now we know that the classic method doesn't really exist, just like the agile method doesn't really exist, but usually there are groups of methods that fall under the same headline. So what is that, classic or agile? And where do I use it? And then we will be having a look at a method for classic project management, and that would be at number 3, PRINCE2. So what is that, PRINCE2? And then we will look at SCRUM for an agile product development method, and then we will join these two together into the, you could say, hybrid or agile project management method, PRINCE2 Agile. PRINCE2 Agile has been, I would say, hot news right now at the time. So there are more and more companies trying to adopt more agile methods. So agile project management has become quite of a focus. And we will be looking at one of the methods that you can use for this. And then conclusion, where can you find more info? And of course, where can I learn about Prince Agile or Scrum or Prince2? Whether you want to have a more classic approach or maybe a more agile hybrid one. So without much further ado, let's dive into the difference. So what is classic? What is agile? And we will be looking at waterfall as a representative method for classic, and we will be looking at Scrum as a agile representative method. So if you look at the waterfall method, you will usually start with talking to the customer or the stakeholder that gives you the requirements. So this means that you will talk to the stakeholder, the customer, and discuss what do they want, what do they need. And usually this then in the end results in a specification list with defined, quite detailed requirements that will tell you what the project scope is going to be. So what is the end result of the project that we will do together? And then the customer will say, well, so how much is this thing going to cost me? How long is it going to take? And then you will tell them, well, according to our prognosed plan, it's going to take about X time and it's going to cost you X euros, dollars, whatever. So what we will do after this, after sitting down and clarifying these specifications with the customer in detail, we will arrive at a very detailed specification list, which sometimes we call the spec, or maybe even the Lastenheft, as you might have heard in German as well. And then we will say, okay, so let's do this. And then we'll say, thank you very much, dear customer. We will now sit down and put down a very logical and very detailed plan of how this project is going to work. So the first step in the waterfall approach for us is that we sit down and plan. Now we will make this very detailed, and this will be a very big stage of the waterfall process as well. And we will arrive at maybe a Gantt chart that is detailed with all of the topics and all of the work packages and all of the detailed to-do lists, I would say, from start to end of the project. So that's going to be our master plan, you could say. So obviously, after we've done this beautiful master plan, we want to start doing something. So we will sit down and do anything that is necessary before we can actually start building or doing our thing. And this is the design stage. Now, the design stage usually comprises of doing conceptual work. So that means, do we need to define processes? Do we need to define maybe some drawn designs as well, some conceptual information like architecture? What are the constraints? Do we need to plan around some of these things when we go into production? So after we've done all of that, and we have a good concept, a good basic approach to how to go on and navigate all of the constraints and the architecture that is maybe necessary, we will then go and build. Now, it doesn't really matter whether we are building something physical or something digital, or maybe even building an idea like a process or something equivalent. We will use our time, sit down, follow the plan, follow the design, and just do what we have defined in the beginning. And as you can see, there is not really a lot of space here to go back, and a waterfall does not go backwards. The water always goes down straight, always goes forward. There is no going back. And that is what gives the name to the method of waterfall. So build is done. We have a beautiful end result, a product or an outcome, you might say, but we cannot give that to the customer or stakeholders unless it has been properly tested. Now, we are obviously talking about methodical, theoretical stuff here. So we know that in practice, very often we do have some problems, or we run into some fixes in build, and then we need to do things that we didn't plan for, and then there's not enough time for testing, right? But we're not talking about that right now. So it's more of the, on a more abstract level, how does it work? So after we have tested the whole thing, the beautiful, perfectly capable end result or product is then given to the customer, much like a present, as you can see here. So the customer then comes, and Waterfall says, well, because we sat down and detailed all of the requirements in the beginning so well, and we stuck to our logical plan so well, there cannot be another scenario but the customer being super happy with the end result and being content. Now, obviously, if we try to adapt that to our, you would say, day-to-day project work, you would very quickly find that this is not always the case, and projects don't always work as they are planned. And because of this, some people sat down and talked about how can we speed up this whole process? How can we be faster? How can we really take into account that changes are going to be made, and we need to have a process that actually reflects that as well. So not going back is actually not an option. So this is where we talk about agile methods, for instance, Scrum. And we will be looking at Scrum here because it is one of the representatives that is the most agile, I would say, at least according to process. Not mindset, process. So how we do things is very agile in Scrum. So instead of sitting down with the customer and really going in depth on the requirements, we will be sitting down and really going in depth on the needs. So instead of focusing on what does the customer want or say they want or need, we will really try to get down to the bottom of what are the pain points? Where does it hurt? So what problem are you trying to overcome with this solution that you are talking to us about? So when we talk about that solution, we want to be a bit more on abstract terms. We want to talk about this as in a general vision sort of sense. So that means that we will define not a very detailed specification of requirements, not a list or a specified document full of requirements, but we want to really describe what the customer needs. This could, for instance, let's say we are talking about an online shop. Let's say this could be something like, The customer wants to have a solution that makes it possible to really connect to customers. And this is done via a platform where we can showcase our products, do marketing, but also interact with customers directly. Now, this will be an abstract vision of this thing. Now, in the end, we might, of course, pose the question, do you really need an online shop for that? Maybe not. There might be other platforms or solutions that would help us with this, but there might also be some constraints. So the vision will not only be like an abstract fairy tale of a thing, that will be a defined, I would say, boundary or a defined goal of what the end result needs to meet. So a definition more of the problem that we are trying to fix, that we're trying to solve. Now, once we have written all of that down, and yes, it is documented, so let's talk about one of the myths here. We do document in Agile methods. We will then say, thank you very much, dear customer, for this beautiful explanation, and thank you very much for clarifying with us what you really need. So now give us a bit of time, and we will come up with a first idea, a quick solution to the problem, a proof of concept, you might say. So, but we know changes are going to come, and we do not have all of the requirements put down in detail. So we can't sit down that long on our own. At some point, the customer is going to have to come back and talk to us about the product. So we will say, we will take a piece of time that has as little risk of change as possible. And in Scrum, we say this is a maximum of 4 weeks or an equivalent of a month. And then we will do some planning, some designing, some building, and some testing. So we will do a quick loop. And these loops are what we call sprints in Scrum. So you see that within that loop, we are on our own. We plan, we design, we build, and test. So we plan the next 4 weeks. We design a rough concept of what we want to do in the next 4 weeks. We need to build something because at the end of those 4 weeks, the customer or the stakeholder is going to come and have a look at what we did. And they don't really deal well with very abstract concepts, so we need to show them something. So it's going to be sort of like a demo or a dummy situation going on, and that thing will need to be tested as well. And in the beginning, obviously, this might mean that we are doing more of acceptance testing directly by customers and stakeholders, whereas at the end, this is going to be like real testing, like quality-based product tests. So as you can see, we will do a very small waterfall loop. So basically, we are still doing waterfall. We just do rapid successive loops of waterfall. And then we will arrive at a very tiny piece of end result, a piece of solution for the end problem, you could say. And then we will talk about this in depth with the customer, and we will get their new ideas, we will get their changes, we will log our problems, our bugs, and our fixes, and then we will move on to the next loop. And we will continue doing this, collaborating with the customer, putting in issues, logging down changes, discussing, negotiating how this is going to work until we arrive at the solution. Now, Scrum says, because in the beginning, we only talked about the problem that really needs to be fixed, and we continuously collaborated with the customer, there is no other way but the end result, making the customer extremely happy. So what does that mean? Well, basically, we can say Waterfall and Scrum are not really that different in the sense that in the end, the customer needs to be happy, right? But the process is a bit different. So the general approach of planning and then designing and then doing something, that is quite the same. Just the steps that we take, the process is different. So let's compare. What is the difference between Waterfall and Scrum, or Classic versus Agile, you might say? Well, when we do a Waterfall approach, usually we will arrive at the fact that requirements are known at the project start. The customer knows what they need, they know what they want, and they just tell us. Whereas in Scrum, we will say the requirements are still vague at the project start. We will be called as soon as a problem arises, and we will try to fix that problem. And because problems usually are very complex nowadays, we will say this is something vague. We don't really understand it fully yet. So it might be a bit risky to base a whole plan around this. So we will be doing the plan as we go approach in Scrum. Whereas in Waterfall, we will just define a plan and go with the plan, stick to the plan. So this means that when we are doing Waterfall and the plan is fixed and the requirements are set, that new requirements during the ongoing project are going to be difficult to incorporate because there is no time, no money for going back. This has not been planned. And this also means, obviously, it's going to cost you more. It's going to be expensive, more time, more money, more resources. Now, in Scrum, we say changes in scope are normal. We know that changes are going to come. So this then means that instead of really planning ahead, as far as we cannot see into the future, we'll just plan as far as we can see. And we will just pick up the changes with our planning, because we haven't planned that detailed in advance anyway, so it doesn't matter if we change anything in future. So Waterfall means we have a fixed project process with very fixed, continuous, consecutive stages. And in Scrum, we would rather do continuous improvement process. So going through quick feedback loops, you could also say sort of a rapid prototyping based approach, and we will be collaborating with the customer all the way. Now in Waterfall, the customer meets us at the beginning, talks about the product, and comes again at the end. We will usually call this sort of like a submarine customer. Like you don't see them, but they're there, and in the end they will pop up and then they will take their product. So in Scrum, we will say we need a customer to continuously collaborate with us, because without the customer, we don't know where we're going. Our vision is too vague for that. And we need the customer to actively be there and review the pieces that we produced, which we call increments. So it's more of a, I would say, highly interactive, rapid cycle sort of thing. Obviously, this means that we need the customer way more. Hopefully, that means that the customer will, in the end, be happier. So it's sort of a trade-off. You have to be there more, and in the end, you will be more happy. Now, Waterfall relies on a very fixed hierarchy, whereas in Scrum or Agile methods, we will rely on self-managed and stable teams, because we believe in the Agile methodologies that the teams, those are the ones that have the technical knowledge, are the ones who know how to fix the problem best. And this is because we have this like problem or solution-oriented focus rather than a very product-based development focus. We will have these self-managed teams. They will have a look at what needs to be done next to produce something that makes the customer happy. So in Waterfall, again, we look at tasks being assigned by, for instance, a project management or by leaders, team leaders, you could say. We know what the plan is. Now it's just about rearranging the schedule, and it's about telling people what to do. It's like coordinating. In Scrum, it is more about collaborating. So it's working together. Tasks are independently pulled by teams. We will call this a pull environment, whereas in the Waterfall area, we will talk about a push environment. So you are not asked, things just arrive on your desk. Yeah, they're pushed to you, so to say. Whereas in Scrum or in Agile, when you are done, you will get up, walk to the work pile, and pull some new work. Now, obviously, you can already probably see some basic differences and also some, I would say, constraints, like, but if we're doing this, then this doesn't work here and there. Yeah, let's talk about that in a minute. And let's focus on the last point. Waterfall relies heavily on communication via meetings and status reports. This is usually quite formalized, and this is usually also heavily documented. Whereas in Scrum, it's all about collaboration and being able to be fast and be flexible and fix things. So we need to be able to talk to each other as often as necessary, which means that we rely on more informal communication. We will try to have knowledge transparent for everyone, and we will do this by quick daily meetings or by stand-ups. So dailies for Scrum and stand-ups for methods like Kanban, for instance. So that means in the daily you don't actually have to stand. Just fun fact here. So what does this mean? When do I use what? Because obviously your scenarios will be different, your projects will be different, and your customers will be quite different. So what works when? When do I use classic methods? Well, a classic method, something where you say, I know what I want, usually means it is a shorter project. I have very clear and fixed goals. Now, obviously, short-term projects relies heavily on what is short to you. It's very subjective, so let's just leave it at that and talk instead about the clear and fixed goals. So you know what you need, you have a defined output. There is a specification sheet, like a spec, and then you can go and do it. You know what you want, you just need to do it. This also means that we will have very clearly defined milestones. So whenever it is possible to firmly define your output in detail with a specification, and it is easy for you to arrive at milestones, I would say, yeah, why not use waterfall? Good method. Another thing that we might look at is when we have a concrete and detailed predictability. So this means that you know what to do because maybe you have done this like a million times before. Customers usually want the same things. There is not a lot of change in your environment. So no foreseeable sudden changes. Usually this also has to do with your branch. So that means if you say, well, the world doesn't change that fast where we are, that also means no sudden changes are going to come. However, if you are working in a very changing environment, so things are constantly changing and you constantly need to adapt to that, you might want to have a look at something else. So classic methods, good for I know what I want, we know what we need, for instance, because we already did an analysis, we already did a proof of concept, or maybe because there are no changes to be expected. Everything is highly regulated. For instance, this might mean like classical projects in construction. So for instance, buildings and plants usually mean that we know what we want, we need a logical plan, and there are no sudden changes to be expected. And for instance, pharmaceuticals. We all are very happy that pharmaceutical stuff isn't quickly done in an agile way and just throw it on some humans and have a look at what happens. So we are happy that this is done in a more classic method or a more classic way. So this is where we would use, for instance, a method like PRINCE. And the name already says it. PRINCE is an abbreviation for Projects in Controlled Environments. So environments with high control and little change, so no need for flexibility. Go ahead and use a classic method. So what if my environment changes on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? If my customers change their mind all the time, however, that might be another problem. But let's say this is because the environment changes so much and because technology becomes rapidly available, for instance, this is an area where you would probably be good to lean towards some more agile methods. So we would say, use agile when you have not clearly defined outputs. So you don't really know what you need at the start. You just know that there is a problem that you need to fix. So if you know the problem but not the solution, go agile. This also means that you will probably have very vague requirements. You just usually roughly know what you don't want or some constraints, and you know that you will change your plan as you go, for instance, because you haven't done this before. This is the first time, or this is a new product, a new service. So something that is high risk and high flex. So you should start a project with a rough vision and then evolve that. Have a vision that evolves during the project. Now, obviously, when we're talking about this, there is quite a risk that in the beginning you start with a vision of, let's say, a fruit that is sweet and not too soft. And you were thinking more in the lines of an orange. And you will just plan as you go and you'll work, and then you see more towards the end, well, my fruit is looking quite yellow and elongated. It's more of a banana. And then we need to talk about, is that what we want? So quick reference here. It is, of course, very important in an agile method because it is defined by very high levels of flexibility to be able to meet ever-changing requirements and environments, that we always try to keep the big picture in mind. So we need more guidance towards the big picture in agile methods, otherwise it can go wrong. Another downside is that if you start an agile project, obviously when you make the plan as you go, you can hardly say, well, it's going to cost you this much money and this much time. So this is more of a we will renegotiate as we go as well. So in agile methods, we usually heavily rely on service contracts. So that means that you will pay me time and material, and as long as we're happy, we have a contract, and it's an ongoing service kind of thing. Or we will talk about modular project management and contract negotiations. So if you're interested about that, there are some really nicely written books about this. And let me know if you have a question, and I'll just pop you an answer in the chat box as well. So, quick summary. Classic when highly regulated environment, not a lot of change, very foreseeable what you need. You know your output, it can be defined, not a lot of changes. Agile method, you don't know what you want, you know your problem, the solution is not yet clear, and it's something that's either highly risky, very changeable, or it's very unknown because it's, for instance, new. Then you would use something that is agile. So agile would mean methods like SCRUM, like Kanban, like a lot of different things. So what environments usually come up with agile? Obviously, information technology, so IT. Software can be changed as very flexible. There are a lot of different solutions for problems, and the right way doesn't really exist. So very often, an agile method will work better. Or conceptual design. So any time that you will look at something and say, well, we need something new, we don't know what it is yet, we need a concept. And it doesn't matter what a concept that is. Is that a design concept? Is that a concept for a new car? Is that whatever that's more on the theoretical or design area? Then you would probably better use an agile method. Obviously, when you talk about automotive, you go into production. Production and assembly usually isn't done in an agile way, but getting to that design in the first place is. So instead of saying like, well, agile doesn't really fit, agile might still fit in your concept phase or in your design phase in your project. Or, of course, you could go full agile. So how does PRINCE2 works with all of this? Well, if we look at PRINCE2, we know that the name PRINCE, projects in controlled environments, means that this is a method that is done for, you could say, more classic areas, more classic project management as well. It is a British project management method, and it focuses very heavily on managing and directing. So it has more of the planning approach and more of the directing approach. You do this, you do that, and do this in an efficient, quick, but also logical kind of way. And it is best practice based, which is why it is highly popular at the moment. So instead of like making up a very good idea, they set all of their project managers down and talk to them about what works and what doesn't in practice. And based on these facts and these experiences, they then set up this method PRINCE2. So PRINCE2 comes with a lot of, you could say, guidelines, a lot of help that you can use to set up your project quickly. And it definitely is a project management method that will help you even as a not so seasoned project manager. So if you're just starting out, Prince will just take you by the hand and lead you through the project, you could say, tell you what to do. It comes with 4 different pieces. As you can see here, there are puzzle pieces on the slide. So let's talk about the principles. So PRINCE2 condensed the most important success criteria for projects into principles. And these principles, they are sort of like the railing on a highway. They will tell you, well, if you deviate beyond this railing, life is going to get hard for you, and we do not know if you will arrive at your destination. So your project will go smoother and better, quicker, and more efficient if you adhere to these principles. Now, obviously, principles aren't rules, so it's not like they will give you a textbook and you just need to follow the book. It's more like, make sure that you do this. Keep in mind that this is super important, and so on. Examples of principles are continuous business justification. So it is focusing on having a good business case and making sure that the business case still stays justified throughout changes in the project. Then we will talk about the 7 themes. So these are areas of knowledge that you as a project manager will need if you want to do your project well. For instance, if we talk about continuous business justification, the principle, it will tell you, well, you need a business case. And then you'll be like, so what is a business case? Well, the themes have an answer for you. So this is all of the knowledge you need to be able to steer your project between the guidelines of the principles. Now, how to steer? Well, this is where the processes come in. Prince has 7 processes that follow each other and really work well hand in hand, and they will prompt you whenever you need to do something. You got a project. Congratulations. Now is the time to look for a sponsor. Has that sponsor got enough responsibility to make decisions within the project? Yes, nice. Then set up a role description and put that signature on that role description. And then next, do you have a plan? Do you know how to proceed? If not, then do it now. So the processes will take you by the hand and tell you what to do when. And of course, there is no such method that works all the time. Every project is different. So PRINCE2 will give you all of the information, all of the guidelines, processes that you need to do any project. For instance, huge building projects. Now, obviously, if you don't do a huge building project, you might need maybe a little less detailed guidance, maybe a little less reporting, and so on. So Prince acknowledges this by having a 4th element that tells you, please tailor your project management method to your project environment. Have a look at what serves you and what doesn't. Don't do it as detailed. Leave the details out. And then you will get a lean project management method that will work for your project. So if we have a look at the mechanisms in there, we will be talking in Prince about what do I do before a project starts, so pre-project. What do I do in the first stage or the initiation stage when I set up all of the planning, all of the reporting, and all of the approaches? And what do I do when I'm actually building? This will be in the subsequent stages, and then in the final stage where we wrap things up and make sure that we met all of the specifications and goals that we set up in the initiation stage. So it will really follow us from start till end, and even a bit in the post-project where we will then start to measure benefits. Oh yes, we measure benefits. So we are going to be quite detailed there as well, and we will have some benefits measurement review documentation going on. So what does that mean? Prince tells us what to do in the process steps. Now, obviously, you need a certain type of knowledge for that, so those would be the themes. And if we're talking about a process step, we usually have several people doing different things. One person coordinating, one person doing the thing, one person checking the thing. That is, I would say, the smallest example. So to be sure who does what, Prince has defined roles and responsibilities that tell us exactly what role is responsible for what. What does a project manager do? What don't they do? What does an executive or a sponsor of a project do? What do they need to decide? What do they delegate? Where are they responsible? Where are they accountable, for instance? And obviously, that is tied to specific knowledge areas as well. So this is the part of who does what and how. Now, on the other side, we also need to talk about how to document this, because documentation is important. And nobody wants to get sick or, I don't know, leave for their well-deserved earned holiday and then be cold all the time because nobody knows what happened. You're the only person with all of the knowledge, and nobody wants that. So let's document what is necessary. So within the process steps, certain types of documentation will be tied in, and we will call these management products. Excuse the abbreviation here, but there was just not enough space. So management products, these are the types of documentation you need, and these are also defined. So they will tell you what to put in what report and what you need to log where in lists. And obviously, the themes and the roles are applicable here as well. So who can access, who can change, who has to write, who has to document, who will check these management products. And all of this will happen within the guidelines of the principles. So very, very brief summary of Prince. If you want to know more, obviously go book a training and discuss it with me. So we did this for Prince now, having a look at what it's about. So now let's talk about what is Scrum about. Now, I know there are more different Agile methods as well, but we don't have like more time than that hour. And I'm looking at the time and I'm already talking for 40 minutes, so it's good that we focus on Scrum. Let's have a look. Scrum is right now the most used Agile method worldwide. Doesn't mean that it's used as it should be or by the book. Yeah, we all know practice always looks a bit different than theory. So something like Scrum is the most used Agile method right now, and this is why we will put a focus on this one. So if we talk about Scrum, very often we will highlight how lean it is. Now, if you look at the Scrum guide, a couple of pages, versus a PRINCE2 book, a lot of pages, that is quite of a difference. So in Scrum, because we need the flexibility of Agile, we need to be able to constantly change what we do because our environment is changing and we're just coping with that, then we cannot have too many rules, because then we might not be as flexible as we need. So this is why usually Agile methods have the least amount of rules and the least amount of guidelines. Technically, this makes it easy to learn, but very hard to put into practice. So if you need more, come and discuss it with us. What Scrum or Agile methods focus on, however, is empiricism. So empiricism means that instead of thinking about something theoretically, and then you will sit down and do some tests to make sure that your theory was correct, you will rather just sit down, do some tests, have a look at, wow, what is happening here, and then try to make an abstract theory out of what you actually see. So it's like the other way around, you could say. It's about doing first and then having a look at what worked later, instead of having some sort of theoretical approach in the beginning. So it's a lot about experimenting, doing, checking what works, having a look at what serves you, and what doesn't just gets thrown out, and you'll do the next set of exercises. So if we look at this empiricism, what we need right here is we need to always know what is happening, because if we are constantly changing our plan, so to say, because we don't really have a plan in that sense, we need to always know what is going on so that everybody can collaborate, which is why transparency is so important. Everybody needs to know what's happening. Plus, having that transparent view of progress also really helps calm people down, because let's be honest, if you don't know what's happening, it might be hard for you to take on responsibility for something. And obviously, the empiricism part means that we will continuously check what works. This is called inspection. And then if we see it doesn't, or we need something else, we will just change it all. And this means adaptation. So not only rapid loops of doing and arriving at an end product via increments, but also having rapid feedback cycles. within the team, outside of the team, with the project, and obviously with the stakeholders. So if we look at Scrum, Scrum is actually focused on agile product development. So this means that we have, for instance, a customer or any other stakeholder that wants something or needs something, and they will usually talk to a role called the product owner. Now, this is a person that acts like an executive, so they can make decisions about the product, and they have full accountability for making the customer happy. This product owner will then discuss what needs to be done with the customer, what the problem is, and then talks to experts about solutions, puts some pieces of requirements into a so-called specification list that is ongoing and ever-changing, which is why we don't call it spec, but product backlog. So it's basically a log, a list behind the product backlog. And this list will be continuously updated as we learn more about what the customer needs and what the product needs. Out of this product backlog, we then derive a product goal. This is what the vision was that we talked about earlier. This is where we want to arrive at, the solution. And then we will sit down and do this in sprints. So as soon as we have the clear vision or the clear goal, we will then have these rapid cycles of doing and improving and giving feedback. So what does that mean? We will start within a sprint with a small planning. In the planning meeting, the product owner and the developers will sit down and talk about what can we do in this sprint. This is going to be called the sprint goal, and it's going to be something like, at the end of the sprint, we want to make sure that we know exactly what we are talking about and we have a concept to show to the customer. So it's more of a prose thing, you could say. And when we have fixed that prose thing, which is basically a milestone, to be honest, developers will sit down and turn this milestone into a plan on what to do. And this is called the sprint backlog. So it's a list of to-dos for the sprint for the developers. At the end of this doing, as we call it, it looks like doing, but it's doing. We will then sit together in daily scrums, talk about the status of the progress, and arrive at a product increment, a piece of done and tested end result. So then the customer is invited. We review the product increment together. We will put feedback and changes down, note all of that, and then we will have a quick retrospective where we will inspect and adapt within the team. So this is about getting forward and having progress. So it's not about being happy and moving the talking stick around. It's about efficiency and productivity. Yeah, don't let it fool you. Scrum is still work. And to be able to not lose focus and really run towards the common product goal, we then have a coach at our side, which is called the Scrum Master, which will help us make sure that our product development works and we are not drifting too far away from what we actually wanted or set out to do. Now, let us merge that down. So how do we merge a more classic approach, like PRINCE2, with agile methods? So if we look at what PRINCE2 is good at, it's directing and managing. And if we look at what agile methods are good at, it's about delivering results, solutions. So PRINCE2 focuses more on the directing and managing part, and delivery is usually where the agile methods are situated. So when we are merging this, that means that some of the direction and managing needs to be given down towards the delivery stage, because if we want to take an agile delivery method and connect that to our governance that we usually have in projects, we need to make sure that that fits. So we will, you could say, impose some of the directing and managing constraints onto delivery. However, the delivery can then work freely, as they are good at. So this means that a part of strategic direction and leadership, but also making sure that we all understand the increased complexity that a project is in comparison to a product, means that we will be clear on what to do. So all of these important decisions will be made more together. Instead of in Prince be made by executive or the project board, we will now do it together. And on the other side, we will make sure that the technical expertise behind agile methods and having solutions quickly and rapidly proved in real life is something that is understood by the managing and directing people as well. So we know what Scrum, Kanban, Lean Startup, etc. can really help us with and how it can make us more efficient. And this will only work if also the management and direction stages give us a lot of feedback and help us adapt. So it's really, again, about collaboration. So if we rely on that, we will be more flexible, but also this will mean we need more informal interaction, less documentation that's formal, and generally more working together. So this is basically what PRINCE2 Agile does. It will strip PRINCE2 of everything that is super strict and everything that can actually be handled more flexibly, and then connecting that with all of the Agile flexibility guidelines. And to put that into a nicer sentence, it's about merging governance with self-organization. So this is really to the point. Now, PRINCE2 Agile is born from this. So we still see a piece of Prince, a piece of the cake we saw before. So PRINCE2 still is the basis for this whole thing, but now we will add toppings to this cake. So that means that we have the principles in Prince, and this is sort of like the mindset. And we will need to add an agile mindset to that, which we call the agile behaviors. We have the themes in PRINCE2, the knowledge areas. But now that we do things in a more agile way, we might also need to have agile themes. And these are called agile focus areas. The agile focus areas consists of concepts, how we do things, but also agile techniques, which are the more detailed version of how we do it. So together, concepts and techniques will tell us the knowledge that we need. And then we have an add-on to the processes in PRINCE2, and these are then the agile frameworks, the process of Scrum, the process of Kanban, the process of Lean Startup. And if we combine all of these, we will have a very powerful hybrid project management method that can help us do as much governance as we need, with as much flexibility in delivery as we need as well. For this, we know it. In agility, we always stress how important it is that we have the same mindset, because people start making decisions more on their own. We all need to think along the same guidelines, right? So that the decisions that are being made really also align with what we wanted to have as results. So for this, PRINCE2 Agile has set up some Agile, you could say values, but we cannot use that word in Prince2 because Scrum already has Scrum values. So let's talk about Agile behaviors. And these are behaviors that will work with Scrum or Lean Startup or Kanban or any of these methods, so a bit more of an abstract version, you could say. And it's about transparency, one of the 3 pillars, if you remember correctly. So it's about openness and putting information out there for everybody to transparently keep track of. Again, this is also a way of the pull principle to make sure that everybody can have information when they need it. They can just go over to the information radiator, which is basically like a project dashboard, you could say, and pull their information of the current status from it. It's about collaboration. So that means that we need to make sure that we can actually do empiricism. We can experiment, which means we need to be able to make mistakes, unfortunately, to rule out those ways as well. So we need a very good no blame culture, and we need trust. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Then we are going to be able to communicate more with each other through all of the management levels. So this means we need visual or personal communication, face-to-face, and that also obviously includes video. And we are going to rely on self-organizing teams, for which we need to make sure that they can actually self-organize. So we need to empower them, give them the tools so they can do it, but also make sure that they are committed to their goals. And last but not least, exploration. Being able to have that empiricism going on that we need for the flexibility. So this means doing experiments, fail fast. That doesn't mean fail all the time, obviously. It means fail, if you have to fail, fail early, so that it doesn't cost you a lot of money, time, and resources if you find out way in the end when you have a complex product going on and now you need to change everything. And we need to have a culture of constructive criticism. It's not about hiding your mistakes, or mistakes are always okay. It's about really learning from this. So you could say lessons learned and solution-oriented thinking, and it's about inspecting and adaptation. So if we look at PRINCE2 Agile, what are some of the concepts that you can be looking forward to if you think, this PRINCE2 Agile doesn't sound so bad? So is it for you? Well, if you are happy to prioritize your requirements, if you are happy to deliver iteratively and incrementally, and if you are happy includes your customers as well, do they want to get involved in doing the thing, then yeah, it is for you. And if we keep in mind that things might change as we go, so that means the customer does not need everything, usually you will find out that if you see something and it actually serves your purpose really well, you can be satisfied with that. This is why we put quality over scope. We would rather have a really good, well-functioning end result or output that makes a customer happy, instead of putting everything in there that you might think of that you might want to need, to put it that way, and it's not really working well, and it's buggy and it's lagging, and basically you cannot really use it without getting frustrated. So we will put quality over scope. This has to do with having to trade off something, because it is about renegotiation. And sometimes if we say in the beginning we do this, then change our mind, we need to swap something, trade something out, so that we can still make sure that our budget does not get blown up improportionately. And obviously we need to be able to inspect and adapt, but also really, really be time focused. And being on time, you guys, is something that in projects usually isn't really done. We all love our milestones, but we just push them back as soon as we don't get it done. And in Agile, this is, I would say, the thing that we need to focus most on. Keeping our time boxes, making sure we deliver. Doesn't matter what we did, as long as we can talk about it and get feedback. And if we're working with something like Kanban, we will probably also put the Agile concept of work in progress limitation in there. So making sure that we prioritize and have the right amount of people in the right process steps. So if this works for you, what are some concepts that we are looking at in PRINCE2 Agile? We will obviously be on time and keep our deadlines, which is why we stress the importance of time boxing, really sticking to the time you set for a meeting, an event, and so on, but also for your delivery date. We will try to prioritize everything, really everything, with the Moscow technique. So must, should, could, and won't. We will obviously need to renegotiate a lot. So Moscow is a thing that we will do continuously. After time boxing and prioritizing and reprioritizing, we will need to strip down our solution to the core and really put down what we need the most, and then go from there. And we will do this by piecing our product into smaller increments, which are reflected by user stories. So pieces of requirements, you could say, or another way to do requirements that really reflect what the need is, what the problem is, the pain point of the customer, so that we can think of our solution flexibly. And then we will obviously keep track of our progress with charts. So don't let agility fool you, there will still be charts. So we will do this, however, in a visual way, and we will obviously post that on our transparent information radiator. So on the dashboard, you can see where we are and where we should be, and maybe even why that is. So after this brief synopsis of PRINCE2 Agile and the differences between Classic and Agile, we do see that projects must be managed according to the situation and the problem. So that means sometimes Classic or Waterfall might be your approach, and sometimes a more Agile approach is needed. Maybe you need to even make a mix of that, a hybrid thing, as we call it nowadays. And yes, that's a good thing. And that is called PRINCE2 Agile, for instance. And that also means that the project management method must fit your organization. So is your organization heavily regulated or not? Do you need to change some of that to be able to adopt flexibility and Agile methods? We also see that pure Agile frameworks like pure Scrum, and we're not talking about the scaled versions here, really the pure one product owner and so on setup. Those frameworks usually cannot manage a complex project on their own, because we need additional governance, we need some level of reporting and so on. So we really need to back that up with a bit more of that, you could say, traditional reporting and governance as well. And this is where the Prince part comes in. And if we look at that, we do see that a lot of project management methods, if you really take it apart, already combine some Agile behaviors with Classic approaches. So not a lot of projects that I've seen in practice really do Waterfall by the book, and you probably also don't. So we also already see that we stray a bit there. We do adapt it as we need. And in the end, a method is a tool, and it should fit and it should work. And if a hammer works for you, then that's the right tool. So it's not about changing something or talking about, do we need Agile or do we need Classic? It's more about how much of what. So what is the perfect individualized approach for you, and then just do what works. So it's not a question of, do we need Agile or Classic? It's not an if or thing. It's about how much Agile can be helpful for us. So do we need the full Agile methodology, or do we need something that's still regulated, but also fairly flexible, which would be PRINCE2 Agile. So if this is interesting, and you want to hear me talk even more, or you want to hear some of my colleagues talk about PRINCE2, how can you learn about this? How can you get certified? So in PRINCE2, we have two pieces. It consists of a PRINCE2 foundation. This is a 2-day, rather theory-based approach, and we will be talking about what Prince is, the ins and outs of the more classic version of Prince. And it will have an examination with a certificate that will be a lifelong thing for you. So you can be certified project manager foundation level. And it's a multiple choice exam, 60 questions and 1 hour. This is available in a lot of different languages, obviously not just English, German, whatever. And then if you want more of that really adaptation part of how to really put that theory into practice, we will be seeing each other again in the PRINCE2 Practitioner. This is a 3-day course, and this consists heavily of exercises. So we will be looking at a use case, and we will be doing some exercises, writing up some business cases and so on. And at the end, you will have the possibility to take an exam as well to be certified as a practitioner. This is a multiple choice exam based on a case study as well. And it's 60 questions, 2.5 hours. And you'll be needing the book here, which is why you can take it into the exam as well. So it's a book-based case study exam. Or you could go the Agile way. You could do an Agile foundation where we will be talking about the basics of Prince and also Agile methodologies like Scrum, Lean Startup, and Kanban, with, again, an examination that will be there for you your whole life. Multiple choice, 50 questions, 1 hour. And if you can't get enough of that, let's do it in practice. The PRINCE2 Agile Practitioner. It's a 2-day course, which again will focus heavily on group exercises and really doing the thing that we learned in theory in the foundation in practice with a use case. After that, you'll also have the possibility of taking an exam, multiple choice, based on a case study, 50 questions, 2.5 hours. You see it's very similar, it's just a different topic. So we have like the more classic version here with a more classic use case, and here we will have incorporated agile methodologies as well. So how do you decide what you need? Well, if you say Prince is cool, but we definitely need agile, opt for the PRINCE2 Agile way here, you could say. You will learn as much as you need from Prince to be able to do project management with a lot of agility. However, if you say, well, I know agile methods already, I just need to know how to put that together by myself. I don't want to see that in practice. I can read the book on my own. Then you might want to go for the PRINCE2 certification way. So this is like more in-depth, and we really talk about the deep detailed levels of Prince here, which we don't in the Agile, because there we talk about agile methods, how to write user stories, and so on. So what about Scrum? Well, Scrum Master 1 is available. It is a 2-day course. It is, as Scrum is, a bit theory, but also interaction. And it's going to have a subsequent examination, which is available in several languages. It's multiple choice, 40 questions, and 1 hour. And you could also do a scrum.org examination, which is a bit harder. Multiple choice, 80 question, 1 hour, but it's only available in English. If you say, I need more of this, I need the practice, I need to do it, you can take the Scrum Master 2. This is 2 days, again, of heavily exercise-focused doing of the Agile methods, with, again, an examination at scrum.org, 30 questions, 1.5 hours, a bit more in-depth about how to apply Agile methodology, of course, focused on Scrum here. So this is if you want to go more in the coach area, and if you want to be talking about product development, really like product management, product ownership, there exists the Scrum Product Owner track. So we will be talking about cutting requirements, detailing requirements, dealing with increment building, and so on, which is again a 2-day course and has a scrum.org certification. These trainings, as all of our trainings, are available face-to-face. Maybe right now not as much as used to be, but as soon as we get out of the home office situation, we can be able to party face-to-face again in our trainings. There will be virtual live classroom trainings that will be usually like this, but you can also see me and we can discuss. So it's more interactive as a format. And you can also have a blended format. So you can have like some e-learning that you can do on your own, and then a piece of, for instance, exercise course as well. So have a look at our website, SERVIEW.de, to have a look at all of the courses in all of the languages and formats that we actually give you. So I have been talking for way too long. Usually I'm not used to this because in the courses we don't talk that much. It's more of a group discussion thing going on. So I need to really catch my breath here. Do you have questions? And if so, just pop them in the chat. And I'll just briefly talk over the last organizational things, and if I don't see any questions, we'll just move on, and you can still email me anytime. I will give you my email address in a sec as well. So prepare your questions. And if you want to have more knowledge, more information on premium webinars, all of the knowledge that we have some really, really cool new things like the design thinking process builder for ITIL and so on. So have a look at all of that. We will have a new training coming up that is called OKR, which is basically how to be agile at the highest level in your organization and to really break down company goals for everybody, yeah, have a look at our YouTube channel. You will find us at SERVIEW training webinar, but you can also find us on SERVIEW TV on YouTube. So I'm continuously scanning the chat here, and I think we're good on the questions. So if you want to have more of that, more clarification, more information about what is Agile, what is project management, email me anytime. You can see my name here, Ruth Lopez at SERVIEW.de, and I'll quickly pop that into the chat box as well. Ruth.Lopez at SERVIEW.de, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So thank you guys for listening, and now it's your turn. Get started with Agile project management. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.